Welcome back, gentle listeners, to our series on Aristotle's Politics. Book 2 is up today. Dr. Jim, busy as he is here again. Finally, he's teaching again, so the semester has started, but we're going to keep rocking and rolling here. And yeah, good to have you back, Professor.
Good to be back, man. Sorry, I've been a little scant in my presence lately, but getting 2 kids moved to Europe and the start of the school year, that added up on me. So
yeah, it's amazing. Hey, when it happens, it like all happens at once.
It does.
As it typically goes. So I get that, man. I get that. It's been busy over here too.
Right.
But
how's the new babe coming along? You guys
good. New babe's great, man. She
and how about your new child? Hey.
Oh.
Hey.
Now the new babe is the child. To clarify, she's the first child we've ever had that actually like sleeps like a normal child. Like all the other kids have my genes, which means they just never slept, right? Just like at all. So we're not sure how to like what to do with that, right? Because like we put the baby down and we're like, we could hang out and like watch a movie, like instead of like one of us has to go up every 20 minutes and try and put the baby back down. So it's kind of like a little weird, you know.
With our kids, it was always this a very similar thing. Where like you get them down and you fought so hard just to get this get them down.
Animal to sleep.
But then
right?
Exactly. Then we had to like shuffle around the house in near silence, right, out of fear of waking the child. So I remember for years and years, like my wife and my sole activity together in the evenings, was simply playing either backgammon or cribbage.
Yeah, we're doing a little
quiet games. Yeah, a little Mario.
We're doing a little Mario Kart right now. Yeah. We're taking advantage of it, so we're having fun.
But our youngest, Cormac, was a good sleeper. Right, He was a very good sleeper. It's almost like he enjoyed the bedtime process.
Yeah, this type of creature is unheard of to me. We've got friends, gentle listeners. We'll get to Aristotle in a minute. Just let us entertain ourselves.
Hey, we're talking household management here.
This Aristotle's all about this, right?
This is more like what Aristotle has in mind for politics than what you see on like Fox News or MSNBC.
Yeah, fantastic tie-in. So back to household management. We've got friends that have they have a kid that will take like a good solid hour nap in the morning, and then like a 2 to 3 hour nap every afternoon, and then goes to bed at like 7 o'clock and is asleep for the entire night. Never wakes up once. That to me is as mythical as Pegasus. I can't even imagine something like that existing. Our kids don't nap. They don't go to bed easy. They don't stay in bed for more than like 30 minutes when they're babies at a time. Right. Yeah, so they drain us. So this is the first one. Anyways, this is the first one that we had that actually will like sleep for like 6 to 7 hours at a time, and we're just not sure how to handle it, man.
Yeah,
we're not sure how the household management goes at that.
Is something wrong?
Right?
Yeah.
Is she alive? Or we have to go check her breathing. You know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, constantly checking the pillows and stuff, right?
Yeah. So
so no, we had this, it was number 6 for us when was the first time we got a decent sleeper.
Yeah, amazing.
The number 5 was a madman. So
this is 5. This is 5 for us. 4 was the mad woman. Marin is Marin's a brute. Yeah.
Remember, for us, it was 6 on 5 pregnancies. So
right.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get to Aristotle now. Book 2, Politics. Jim, you always like to start with the executive summary of what we've done before. So let's have it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so book 1. What do we learn there? Well, we learn first and foremost that the order of the city is really on an analogy with the order of the human being, on an analogy with the order of the whole universe, right? So like the city is it's kind of the pivot point, right, between all these different levels of order in the universe, and it's going to have the same basic structure, right?
Yeah.
And we learned also that the city is natural. This is very important, right? That there was no decision to have a city, right?
So they didn't just mock up a social contract.
Yeah, and exactly. So Aristotle thinks where you have parts of things that are not themselves independent substances in their own right, their combination is natural. Okay, it's not artificial. And so he says, look, man and woman are, speaking of which, right, are not independent naturally. They need each other, right?
Right.
So the marriage and the household that comes following on the marriage is perfectly natural.
Is a natural kind, right?
It's a natural kind, right? Okay, and so
there's a real ontological thickness, a delicious thickness to Aristotle's worldview, and this is going to be important to, I think, just to show like some implications of this downstream, especially theologically, this sort of thickness,
Yeah,
a real ontological thickness, not just to the state, but or the nation, but also the family, has important implications for theology, including doctrines like original sin and stuff
yes,
like that.
yeah,
So, like, people might think that, and of course, political authority too, but there's certain aspects of this, of a thicker worldview,
yeah,
ontologically speaking, that can tie in and either help to resolve or alleviate certain difficulties in places that might not seem immediately obvious, like
exactly.
theology. But if you eschew this worldview and you don't have this thickness there, those problems become, I think, much more pronounced and difficult to deal with. If that makes sense. Yeah.
Oh, I agree. Here's an even more pedestrian
Mm-hmm.
example, right? Yours is more interesting, but so famously in contemporary metaphysics, there's this problem of composition, right? And all these Sorites problems of how can we get things aggregated together such that many things become one thing, right? And interesting, like Aristotle's the guy who says, like two can't become one, right? But yet, he's got this compositional metaphysics all over the place, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think because really, it's because what he really means there is the naturally two cannot become one, but of course, you know, the unnaturally one can become a single one. The unnaturally two can become one. Do you see that?
Mm-hmm.
And so so why does Aristotle not worried about like a Sorites problem for a living organism? Because the parts of the living organism belong together. It's like
Right.
what makes that one thing? It's the normativity of the natural order of its parts. Do you
Yes.
see that?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So I think like when we're bending over backwards to have a sense of like what distinguishes an organism from a heap of sand, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Aristotle's utterly untroubled by that because he'd say, well, yeah, because those parts are mutually dependent on each other to be what they are.
Mm-hmm.
There's an order of nature, right?
Right.
And then you get this like stacked compositional universe that is Aristotle's, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a lot of times when we go looking for Aristotle for answers for things like our contemporary versions of compositional problems. Well, it's not going to work unless you're willing to like go the full blown normativity of nature, which probably is ultimately going to like get you hooked to an unmoved mover too, right?
Right.
You know what I mean? So, and
And we have had that conversation,
we've had that
and I
conversation.
think
Yeah,
that's right. I think that's what
yeah,
you should do.
right. And this is very important for Aristotle's politics, right? So the man and woman are not naturally alone; they're naturally together. They're naturally one. Then that thereby constitutes the household. But then also like within the household, the master and the slave are not naturally. Neither of them are naturally supposed to be one. They should be together, right? Or shouldn't be two. They should be one. They should be
Mm-hmm.
together. But then the household itself is not self-sufficient. It needs
Mm-hmm.
a neighborhood, a village, right? But the village is not self-sufficient. It needs a city. And then like your and the way organisms are kind of like a stopping point, a self-sufficient level of development for Aristotle, the city in the political arrangement is a self-sufficient level of development for Aristotle,
Yes.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the really important takeaway from book one. Now we get some of his stuff about wealth in book one. We'll talk about that. It's going to come up again today, right? But it's that notion of the natural compositionality, to coin an ugly term, right,
Mm-hmm.
of the components of political life, right, and how that constitutes the city, and utterly foreign to our view, right, where we think in these like radically social contractarian views where we all carry rights and interests independently of the city, and we'll opt in or opt out depending on how it works out for us. Not
Yes.
Aristotle's view.
Right. And I wanna say that if we just go with our sort of basic moral intuitions, um, I think they side with Aristotle. Most people do think that there is intuitively a such thing as political authority,
Yep.
right? And that this is a legitimate authority within certain bounds, right? But as other philosophers like Michael Humer have pointed out, I think very competently, especially in his book, The Problem of Political Authority, that's really hard to ground and make sense of on the modern liberal paradigm.
Right.
Like it's
Exactly.
real, and in fact, he says like he's arguing for anarchism, right? It's like
Yeah.
there isn't.
Yeah.
But I want to say no. If we go back to Aristotle, we can find how those intuitions can be grounded and properly thought about,
Yeah.
right? Mm-hmm.
And actually, this is the Hannah Arendt in some of her later work in a Between the Past and Future makes the same case, like very
Mm-hmm.
much same case. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
excellent. Onward to book two.
all right, so that takes us to book two, and if we look at our table of contents of book two, right, in the Reeves, so book two, we're gonna get. I guess I don't need to show it, right? We get he moves into so book one is like what is politics and what would be our method for studying it, right? And then maybe some broad principles like about the different levels of structure within it. And now he's going to get into like what are very, very long multi-book discussion of like what are the actual political constitutions and which one would be the best.
Yep.
Okay. And in this one we get a criticism of Plato's Republic. Okay. There's going to be another criticism of Plato's Republic later in the book. Okay, but we get his first run at Plato's Republic. Now, I think it's interesting. He doesn't call it a criticism of Plato. He calls it a criticism of Plato's Republic, right? And at certain points in the discussion, you'll even see him, at least in the Reeve translation, Aristotle will say, well, Socrates in the Republic says. He doesn't say Socrates. He doesn't say Plato. He says Socrates in the Republic says. So I think I kind of this little turf thing here because, like, we talked about when we did Plato's Republic, how my own take is like the politics of the Republic is kind of a put on, right? It's more of a lampoon of the view being put forward than is the actual view, right?
Yes.
And Aristotle's going to pile on.
Yeah.
Here.
Now I do want to, because a lot of times people pit Aristotle and Plato against each other, and certainly as we'll see, there are differences, very real and significant differences. But one of my professors always used to emphasize, well, look, we should read Aristotle's sort of intent focusing on Plato, not just in his politics, but in other places as well. He focuses a lot on Plato, not like so much as like he really hates or disagrees Plato, but he actually sees Plato as being closer to the truth than all the other options.
Yep.
And he's just trying to move that a little bit further along. So we should see it more as like a compliment paid to Plato. And that's why he's spending the most time on Plato. He thinks that this guy is the closest to getting it right.
Aristotle has just kind of a tick where he'll begin sentences with Plato was not far wrong. Plato was not far wrong. I like that phrase.
Yeah.
And also, I always like to point out too, is that Aristotle did not leave the academy until Plato's death. Like, he left in a huff because Plato left the place to his nephew, not him. Okay. But it's not like there was like a breakup with these two guys where they just couldn't be under the same roof or something like that, or like Aristotle felt the need to go start his own school for reasons of.
We didn't have a Van Halen situation.
Yeah, you didn't have a Van Halen situation here, right? It was that until Plato's death, this was all housed, in a single research project, right? Different emphases, right?
Yeah, it was who was Van Halen and who was David Lee Roth of those two guys? That'd be interesting.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think
we know Aristotle was a little more gaudy, but dang, Eddie and Roth were both gaudy people.
Yeah, exactly.
maybe not a good analogy. I don't know if it maps. Yeah.
who had the skinny legs, right?
Well, David Lee Roth, man. You see that guy's high kicks, man.
Yeah, but he was in better shape though too. He was in better shape.
Yeah, he was right.
So, all right,
but Eddie was pretty acrobatic too. But we're done with that now.
Exactly. So anyway, in our discussion, I'm going to mainly concentrate on what he has to say about Plato. He goes through a bunch of these other constitutions and has various things to say. There might be a couple things I'll pull out of there in terms of getting the general picture, but you can read the politics as like an insight into like Greek political history, or you can look at it like more systematically. And we're going the latter.
Yep.
Right? Okay. All right. So, because actually I can get over my historical pay grade in a hurry with that. Okay. So let's look at some things in the first chapter of book 2. Okay. He sets the primary theme here. Okay. As at least in the next few chapters here, where he's talking about Plato, is the question is of what should be shared among the citizens in the city. Okay. And the issue is going to come down to like to what degree women and children should be shared, and to what degree property should be shared. Okay. And the listener, may remember or may be familiar with the fact that in Plato's Republic, Socrates says that we absolutely have to have sharing of women and sharing of children. And what's meant by this really is there cannot be anything like a traditional family structure, right? Literally, I think what we're saying is there can't be a household
within the certain class.
Within a certain class, yeah. Right. So for Plato, it's interesting. It's a very important contrast for Plato of the Republic. We'll just say Plato hereafter, right? Because the laws is different, right? But for Plato of the Republic, there is only one level of composition, and it's the city, right? The household, the marriage, and the village are destroyed, right? Okay, and so Aristotle is going to look at that and say that's contrary to nature, right? And I think Plato's, that's because nature sucks, right? And you should get out of the cave and not come back, right? I mean, an overstatement, but you see the point there is like, so that though that multi-tiered level of compositionality that you get in Aristotle,
Hmm.
Plato is denying that there should be such a thing, right?
Yeah.
That there's
Hmm.
just the city, and this is why he says, Plato says again and again, and Aristotle's going to quote him here: the city is one. The city is one. The city is to be one, which means it, like, the parts are to be not absorbed in the whole. The parts are to be broken apart, like we're going to go down to like to the prime matter here and form directly that way. Do you
Right.
see that?
Hmm.
Okay, so household as we know it has got to go. The marriage and family have got to go.
Right. They
And
don't even have a virtual presence
yeah,
anymore.
not even a virtual presence, right? And I think it's a good way to put it, Pat, is like for Aristotle, there's still going to be kind of a, well, maybe even greater than virtual presence. We'll see this in a second, right? But they've got to
Yeah.
go,
He
right?
might even be closer to Scotus if we're getting into that debate.
Yeah,
And
yeah. And so, because think of it, for Plato, again and again in the Republic, what's the point? You can't have diversity, you got to have unity. Where there's
Hmm.
many, there's got to be a one. Where there's many, there's got to be a one. There's got to be a one. And Plato worried about familial and like regular heterosexual monogamous marriage, right? Because you're going to be allied to that first and foremost, right?
Hmm.
And not the city. So Plato develops this whole notion of education that's going to disabuse you of any attachment to a single spouse and your children. You won't know who
Yep.
your children are.
Once a
All
year, we'll
this.
have a giant barn orgy.
Yeah, exactly.
Get the best of the stock we
Yeah, we're,
can.
we're gonna have the rigged lottery to decide how spring break comes out every
Play
year.
some
Right.
CCR.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Okay. And so Aristotle is saying in these first two chapters, well, the city cannot be one in that sense. It
Hmm.
can't be. Well, and partly the argument was made in book one because um look, it's not up to us. This is how nature goes, and nature will have its way. People are going to attach themselves to their spouses. They're going to attach themselves to their friends in their neighborhood, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. And but we get more direct arguments here in book two, chapter two. Okay, so where Aristotle says, where is it here? Oh yeah, he says this is right around 126a30. Okay. That is why reciprocal equality preserves cities, as we said earlier in the ethics, since this is also what must exist among people who are free and equal. Okay, it's that notion of reciprocal equality that he brings up. Okay, and it comes up again and again and again throughout this book of the Politics, where what Aristotle is saying is, what really makes the city work is not that it's been made into an absolute unity, but it's that you have a reciprocity among the parts. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so like what brought the man and woman together in the first place? A natural reciprocity, right?
Yes.
What brings the household together, the man, the woman, their children, and their slaves, is a natural reciprocity. They need each other, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What brought the village together is the reciprocity that, Pat's family is good at making horseshoes, Jim's family is good at baking bread, so there's a natural reciprocity here. Okay, and as soon as you destroy the natural reciprocity, Aristotle thinks you're going to destroy the bond that makes the city happen.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You see that? Okay, so Plato's attempt to make the city one by destroying the natural mediating institutions of human life is actually going to make it
It's undermining.
it's
Mm-hmm.
undermining the very thing that Plato wants, right?
Mm-hmm.
And by I think Plato knows this well in the Republic, but you see that, okay? So and so what Aristotle is saying here is, no, whatever we do, we have to find a way to have a unified order in the city, but one that preserves the natural mediating institutions that make for the reciprocity.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay. And I think that's the central argument of book two. Okay.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
All right. All right. Now, he then gets specifically into whether or not. What's the master argument of book two? Well, where if you really want unity, you have to keep the parts in their natural reciprocity relationships. You can't just
Mm-hmm.
knock it all down. Now let's go right to the family. Right. Okay. So what about, should people be able to have their own children? Should they be able to have their own spouse? Should they have their children? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. If you look at, I'm in book two, chapter 3 now, right by one. Where are we here? this would be 126 or 1262A, right around like 32.
Remind the listeners of your edition, Jim. Which one are you
Oh,
using?
I'm in Reeve. I'm in Reeve.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, but the marginal number should be the same
Yeah.
anyway. Okay. So just to quote Aristotle, he says, if in addition what is said by Socrates is also harmful in another way, for what is held commonly by most people gets the least care. For people give most thought to what is their own, less to what is communal, right? I mean, look at a park, or
Look at public bathrooms for the
yeah,
most part.
exactly. Or only as much as falls to each of them to give. For apart from anything else, the supposition that someone else is attending to it makes them neglect it more. Just as in the case of household services, many servants sometimes give worse servants than few. Each of the citizens acquires 1,000 sons, although not an individual, but rather any random one is likewise the son of any random citizen, so all will be likewise neglected by them all.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I think this is brilliant. Okay,
Indeed.
okay, what bonds me to the city of Atchison where I live, like this is actually true, right? Okay, like the only reason I live here is because it's so darn good for my kids. It's a very, it's my children are having a great child, or the one they've had a great childhood, or they're having a great childhood here. Okay. And so really what bonds me to the city is my, you know, absolute bond to my children. Okay. Do you see that? All right.
Right.
Whereas, but if I didn't feel any bond to those kids, right, would I be at all dedicated to the city of Atchison?
Yeah. What glues you to the city is the more
Yeah.
proximate bond of your family, the
Yeah,
glue of your
yeah.
family, right?
So I don't care how good it is for the generic child. I mean, I do at some level, but more importantly, I care how much it does for the kids who
For
look like my
your
old man.
right, and that
Right.
that is the incentive for even my own involvement in our local city, and by
Yeah.
city we mean like the city of Waukesha, Wisconsin, not like
Yeah,
New
or
York City.
maybe more specific, like your parish, your friend network, stuff like
Right.
that.
Yeah.
And so, so what he's saying here is like if like it's very hard to care for children in the abstract. What you do is you care for children in the concrete, right?
Your kids, right?
Yeah, and the more the more they look like you, and the woman you love, and your parents and all that, the more you're bonded to them, and the more you'll actually look out for them. Okay, but then people say, well, so then what you're saying is it's just like, you know, my kids against me and my kids against the world. But no, once I understand, there's reciprocal, you know, there's reciprocity that's necessary for our surviving and my children flourishing. Then I'm actually, through my bond to my children, I'm more bonded to the community I live in, right?
Right.
Whereas Aristotle's saying, well, no, if you took your kids out of the mix, you'd be less bonded to that community, right? I think it's a brilliant argument.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it gets me, you know, actually let me do another quotation here, just a little below that, if you don't mind my reading.
Oh, for sure.
Yet is this way of calling the same thing mine, as practiced by each of the 2 or 10,000 people, really better than the way that they say mine in cities as things stand? So, I mean, if my kids are, you know, like 10,000 people have claim on the same body of kids, in what sense are they mine, as opposed to the right now? No, I know these 6 of them; those are mine, right? For the same person is called my son by one person, my brother by another, my cousin by a third, or something else in virtue of this, of some sort of kinship, whether of blood or connection by marriage. His own marriage in the first instance, or that of his relatives. Still others call him my fellow clansman or my fellow tribesman. It is better, in fact, to have a cousin of one's own than a son in that Socratic way. Okay, you see, that's like I'm more bonded as things stands now to a cousin that I would have in the way, in a natural political association, than I would in this sort of like engineered thing that Socrates wants.
Yes.
Where, do you see that? I think it's important. And this gets me, if we can get naughty now, starting to think about things like public schools and stuff like that.
Oh,
like,
yes.
Yeah, like essentially, like the interesting thing that we've done is we've, you know, for the last 200 years, what have we increasingly done? We've come increasingly to see children as what? The common property of quote unquote the city, right? And it would seem we increasingly care less about them, right?
And less, right?
Like as soon as your kids are no longer of school age, you're gonna start to like bitch a lot more about your property taxes, right? Because you don't really care. Yeah.
Homeschooler right here,
Schooler, yeah.
right
You know,
there.
you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. So I actually think we're getting kind of interesting case for homeschooling here, right?
Bring it.
Okay. Right. You know what I mean? Because what we're saying is like, no, like what you really care about is the nitty gritty, particular, affectionate attached bond that you have, right, with
Mhm.
your blood, right, and to think that's somehow going to be replaced by schools is silly, right,
It is. Mhm.
and to think that somehow it's going to you know like that's going to lead to like what's in the best interest of children is an interesting question. Now we'll see later in the book Aristotle's all for common public education of a sort, right, but
Mhm.
once again think of the scale he's dealing with here, right, and like everybody would probably have a turn teaching and stuff like that,
Right,
right,
and not
yeah.
necessarily shipping off your kids for the majority of a day to the
Yeah.
kind of circus, to be to be
Clown
polemic, jail for kids, right?
clown show possibly,
Like
but
clown show visits right
yeah.
now
Right,
these
you know what I
days,
mean?
yeah. Mhm.
And for the record, we homeschool our kids up to a certain point, and then we send them like, we send our kids to high school, and we
Yep.
send them and we homeschool them, right? Well,
Mhm.
because they have to learn to live in, like, the the nightmare that is contemporary institutional life, okay? So that's that's the way we make the move for high school, right?
This is true.
Yeah.
Mhm.
We kinda want the clown show at a certain point.
You gotta
But
expose them to it at some point,
yeah,
right?
at some point, yeah. But do you see this? Like when I was reading this, I was thinking, man, my gosh, man, like what would the Aristotelian critique be of like public school? This is it, I think, right?
That'd be
You
a
know what I
good
mean?
paper.
It'd be an interesting paper, yeah. Like what would
Mhm.
Aristotle say about public school here,
Mhm.
and not just public, even like big private schools, whatever, right? But the idea is the more you see the point of the political association is not to support the actual natural people naturally related in doing what they do, and the more you make it abstract, the less bonded we are to it, the less one we are, and the less effective it's going to be.
Right, yes. Yeah, brilliant. Brilliant summary of book
Yeah,
2. Mhm.
I think like I would call book two is like it's like the politics of affection association,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that's
Right, the
very good.
politics of personal
Mhm.
attachment, right?
Mhm.
Okay, so then if we look at this, he's now going to get into okay, so we got women and children, right? Uh, and let's see if there's anything I want to quote here. No, I think we're fine there. Okay, so then he's going to get into property. And now, once again, we're going to get a similar argument here, right? So, do you really care for stuff that's yours, or do you really care for stuff that's held in common? As you pointed out,
Yeah, yeah.
go to the public restroom at any park,
Right.
okay, and ask
Yeah,
yourself,
and try to stay in there, right,
try to
yeah.
stay in there. Yeah, okay, right. You know what I mean? Like, how many would you want to be willing to walk barefoot into a public restaurant restroom at a at a city park right now?
Right, mhm.
I, I would take the filthiest wrestling mat over that, right?
Right.
Okay,
And his
so
argument is, like, so hilariously common sense too,
yeah,
it's like, you know? But anyways.
yeah. Now and now we have to be careful too, because like Aristotle, as we saw in book one, he's going to bring it up here in book two. He's not carte blanche. You get all the private property you want. He's
That's
not,
right, yep,
right?
and he's certainly not a Lockean when it comes to private property
Not at
either.
all, right?
Mhm,
But he does think that you have to have skin in the game, right?
mhm.
That he thinks that in as much as something is yours, and it's almost like he wants to say, "Hey, Pat, here's the deal, man. This like the city is going to allot you. You have the bathroom at Washington Park. That's your
Mm,
bathroom."
mhm.
And everybody, and he actually says he says Aristotle wants common use of things. He has no problem with that, but he wants private property. So like
Mhm.
anyone can use Pat's bathroom at Washington Park, but everyone's going to know what
It's Pat's
it's Pat's
bathroom, yeah.
bathroom. So if you go in there and there's like flies breeding in the urinal cakes and stuff like that, right? Okay,
And
guess
if there's
what?
something in the urinal that shouldn't be in the
It
urinal.
shouldn't be in there. Who's that
Right,
reflect on? It reflects on
right,
Pat
uh-huh.
Flynn, right? Okay, and we go to like Jim's, public public restroom at a park, right? And if it's terrible, even though everyone has access to it, right?
Right.
Then Aristotle really has in mind land here. Like he wants like an agricultural commons,
Yep.
but the condition of the land is hooked to certain people who own it,
You know,
right?
it's funny because I don't wanna get out of my, uh, slim area of cultural expertise, which is extremely slim, but my understanding is that in Japan, there are bathhouses where people go and
Yeah,
take baths, but, my understanding is that they are typically privately owned. Somebody owns one of these baths, so it's something that's commonly used, quite affordable, people just go and take public baths, but also seem to be very well kept and sanitary. I think they're dying off. I think that they're kind of
Yeah.
I watched a YouTube video, guys.
Yeah.
It's the depth of my education on this. I've just found it fascinating, and it was
It's fascinating.
just following one of the owners. It was a privately owned but public use type of thing. So it's like it's just what popped in my mind when you're detailing Aristotle's position here. You know, it's some guy's bathhouse that is used by many, many people. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. By the way, there's a question came on the side. This is a really good question from Bookish Brendan. Like, why are libraries relatively well maintained compared to park restrooms? It's a good question, my friend. It's a good question. I think
something has to do with the nature of the activity, but I don't know, man.
Yeah,
I've been in some real dumpy libraries in my day. So
I was gonna say it might be the fastidiousness of the people who work at libraries, right? But
yeah,
I'm not sure. That's a good question. We'll have to kick that to our sociology wing of the Pat Flynn show here.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
The department's under construction.
They're sort of under construction. So yeah, there are outliers. That's a great. I love that question, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Well done, Bookish Brendan. Anyway, and also Aristotle says too, like there's like things are more pleasant when you're using something that's yours. Like there's a sense of pride in it.
And not only that, but like, hold on, yeah. Let's think about this and pressure test it. There are other cultural influences. So let's go to Japan. Mm-hmm. Again, I'm fascinated by Japan. You can go to a cafe in Japan, Jim, and get coffee and pet hedgehogs, right? This is something that Japan does. Like if it's something like you didn't know you needed it until you had it type of thing, right? Of course I need to pet hedgehogs. Yeah. But Japan, their sort of culture is one of a great, people would call them negatively nationalistic, right? But it's a great family sort of identity to Japan. And I think that factors into a lot of most people also recognize Japan is far more hygienic in many respects than the United States. And I think that has to tie into a sort of culture and virtue in the way that there's a high trust sort of sense of family in that nation. That you're not like, that ain't the case for Los Angeles, for example, right? So I don't know if that would be like, if certain instances in Japan of well-kept communal property would be an exception of Aristotle's rule, or if you dig deeper into what's supporting that would actually be somewhat affirmative of it. I put that out there for contemplation as well.
Yeah, it's in play, right?
Right.
Yeah, excellent. So there's a great summary passage I want to give you that pulls both these arguments about family and property together. So,
and we will be doing a philosophy for the people field trip to Japan at some point.
Yes, that would be cool.
Yeah. Right. Guided tour from two people who have known nothing about the country.
Exactly.
Follow Jim and I around.
Jim and Pat's Great Adventure. So this is
that'd be amazing.
That would be amazing.
We have to do it.
This is 1264a, starting at about 5. So Aristotle says, "These things then do not take place for those who make the city too much one thing. And in addition, it is evident that they do away with the function of two of the virtues, namely temperance in regard to women. For to keep away from another man's woman due to temperance is noble work. And generosity with one's property. One cannot show oneself to be generous, nor perform any generous action, since it is in the use made of property that generosity's work lies. Such legislation indeed looks attractive and may seem to be philanthropic. For anyone who hears of it accepts it gladly, thinking that we will all have a wondrous friendship for all, especially when someone blames the evils now existing in constitutions on properties not being communal. Lawsuits against each other over contracts, perjury, trials, flattery of the rich, etc. Yet none of these bad things comes about because property is not communal, but because of depravity. For we see that those who own and share property communally have far more disagreements than those who own property separately." Okay, so I really think it's interesting what he's doing here, and actually we can find an argument sort of like this in Plato's Republic, where he talks about diseases of intemperance, right? But what Aristotle's saying here is okay, really what the communal sharing of family is, what the undermining of family is, right? And like you could look at that like in all sorts of ways, like in the deferring of the raising of our children to someone else, right? In our not being held to lifelong maintenance of marriage bonds when possible, that sort of thing, right? It's to say the issue of the virtue of temperance or the virtues necessary for raising children will be taken care of for you by someone else. You know what I mean? Like, you're not going to have to gain the virtue of temperance because we're going to like make it very easy to like survive without being married.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to have to gain the virtues necessary for the child rearing because we're going to let someone else do this for you.
Yeah.
Right. Or like with respect to property is like, you're not going to have to learn how to be generous. Right. Which is what Aristotle is saying here. Generosity is a necessary condition of civilization, of the city. Right. We have to have fair exchange. If I have a little more and you need it, I'm going to let you have it, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
But hey, if we just take everybody's property, there's no need for the development of generosity. Right. And what he argues here in this passage is, well, the very thing you want to do now is to make the city one, you're going to make it worse. Right. Because there's no set of laws that are going to be completely enforce all occasions of temperance, all occasions of generosity. And then when you and I don't have those personality dispositions and we get together, we're going to fight now.
Yeah.
Right. So it's once again, it's like he's seeing the self-defeating attempt to undermine the natural relations in favor of a kind of communal oneness is always going to like fall back into this problem of undermining the very thing it wants to get to.
And I would say we have very strong empirical confirmation of the hypothesis.
Yes. Yes. Right. I won't even call that my unsupported sociological claim for the day. That's just, it's a claim. Right. Yeah, exactly. Do you see that? I think once again, it's brilliant what he's up to here.
Yeah.
Right. Right. And once again, you know, he goes on, I'm not going to go into all the details. We've gone for quite a while, but he doesn't say, hey, I'm saying you get all the property you want. No, because like that's going to get out of hand and we don't want to acquire for the sake of acquisition. We want to acquire for the sake of being able to have skin in the game. Right. Okay. You know what I mean? That's why we want to do this. Right. And note, it's all aimed at developing virtues of sort of social generosity. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's great. All right. Anything else in book 2 we want to get? We could always do a part 2 on book 2.
Yeah, I don't think we need to because, like, once again, he gets into all the individual cities.
Yeah, there's nitty gritties in here, guys, that you just have to go and read to get out. We're not going to pull all those out for you. Just trying to give you the general overview.
Okay, but there was one little quote. I think it's really great for our own contemporary concerns. Right. This is it's in chapter 8. Right around 1268a20. Aristotle says, but the fact that the farmers do not possess weapons and that the craftsmen possess neither land nor weapons makes them both nearly slaves of those who do possess weapons. Right. So I mean, the Second Amendment isn't my biggest issue, but I thought that was, if anyone's looking for
a little Aristotelian support. There you go.
A little Aristotelian support right there. Right. Okay. Yeah. So that's all I have on book 2.
Awesome.
If I think of anything I want to pull in there, we can always do it in the recap when we do book 3.
Yeah. And the fact that we got the idea for Pat and Jim's Great Adventure is just, gentle listeners, you have to tell us, do you want to go on Pat and Jim's Great Adventure? The answer is yes. Just tell us where in the comments. And then afterwards we have to do Pat and Jim's Bogus Journey somewhere.
The second one. Right. Yeah. Might have to talk to legal on that one for copyright reasons. I'm not sure.
To be sure. We're going to walk. We're going to read philosophy. We're going to do jujitsu.
Exactly.
Listen to great music. Eat great food. It's going to be phenomenal. And it's always got to be in a location we know nothing about.
Nothing about. Yeah.
Just bumbling around like.
Right.
All right, before we wrap this up, Jim, it's been probably like a week since we've really done, maybe even 2 weeks. What do you want to announce? Anything you're working on? Anything you want to point people towards?
Nothing new. You know, always check out the Substack, but I have to admit there's nothing new there. And you can find links to the courses that I'm working there. I should have a new Substack. I got to get through this week, and I'll be able to get back to doing some writing. So
yeah, I got some new Substacks if people are interested. I posted a critique of Dr. Andrew Loke's new moral argument for the existence of God. A paper came out on that, and I thought it was an interesting paper, but I thought it did not succeed. So if people want to go take a look at that, that's on there. And then I also reviewed a brief review of Fazer's new book on Catholicism and racism and CRT. So there's some new content on my Substack if you want to go that.
Nice.
All right, gentle listeners. Well, thanks for tuning in. We will catch you next time. Please like, share, comment, all that good stuff. And we'll see you when we